where we are. And it's because of their love and their courage and their dedication and their persistence that I'm here. You know, sometimes they love a bit too hard and left with bruises. But we're here nevertheless. I want to thank this extraordinary gathering of folk, all the folk who are working behind the scenes to make this breakfast possible. The people who set up the tables, who bring down the tables, the folk who cook the food, the folk who will clean up your plates after this. We want to lift up that invisible labor. President Justin, I want to just thank you for your leadership and all that you're doing. I mean, you know how you all are on the front lines. You know, the front lines is so many different. So I'm going to jump into my remarks. Is that okay? Sometimes people just come up here and run their mouths. I want to talk. July 4th marked the 250th anniversary of the founding of the country. And anniversaries of this magnitude often occasion opportunities to tell the American story, to look back and reaffirm the basic ideals of the country and to reflect on the present challenges that the nation may face as Americans look toward the future. We often make declarations of love, but not all of what is celebrated has to be true. American anniversaries are often moments to turn a blind eye to the evils of the past and the present, to suppress the facts of America's divided soul. Stories of America's greatness are told often to affirm the belief that ours was and remains the greatest country on earth. But like previous anniversaries commemorating the founding, the 250th exposed the maddening split at the heart of the country. Today, Americans remain bitterly divided, and those divisions are rooted in part in the irresolvable ideas that America is, or the idea that America is a beacon of freedom and that it must remain a white republic. Distrust has seeped into every facet of our political lives and festers in those intimate spaces where hatred grows unchecked. We are witnessing, I believe, the dismantling of the world that made your and my lives possible. Shall I say that again? We are witnessing the dismantling of the world that made our lives possible. The assault on two vital pieces of legislation that changed the direction of the country, the Hart-Celler Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. One affected the demographics of the country. The other transformed who could wield political power in the country. We're witnessing the dismantling of DEI in the public and private sectors, federal agencies instructed to stop enforcing key civil rights protections, and all-out assault on American higher education, using diversity initiatives as examples of reverse discrimination, the gutting of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, efforts to undermine the 14th Amendment, and assault on American history itself. All of which is framed by the weakening of democratic institutions. Court enshrined the idea of the unitary executive, where trust in the court is at an all-time low. Congress abdicating its constitutional responsibility, all the while the fourth estate, the press, struggles with corporate capture and political pressure as investigative journalism and local news suffer under the weight of it all. Y'all all right? I know it's early.
No, we're here.
In short, our democracy is in trouble. It's in deep trouble. And I say this not as a partisan, even though I'm on MS now, but to offer a description of the hard reality that we as a country must confront and that you're confronting every single day. Come on. In the 250th year of this fragile experiment, we find ourselves standing on the precipice, wondering if this democracy will survive. And the pressing question remains, what will we do about it all? I'm reminded of this powerful formulation in The Wretched of the Earth, published by that Martinican psychiatrist, Frantz Fanon. Each generation out of relative obscurity, must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Thomas Jefferson put it a different way. He understood that democracies could become routinized, controlled by the dead hand of the past, so he insisted that each generation take up the task of active renewal. Democracy isn't something we inherit passively. Traditions aren't something that just come to us. It's not enough to just simply say black folk died for the vote. First of all, that's a lie. We didn't die for the vote. We died for freedom. The vote is a vehicle towards freedom.
Right.
In this moment of deep crisis, we must take hold of the responsibility for this place, and that requires, in my view, an honest confrontation with the past that has us all by the throat. Just think about it. 6 years ago, after the murder of George Floyd, we were experiencing a racial reckoning. The demands of Black Lives Matter, claims about white privilege and anti-racism, and attempts to remedy long-standing racial inequality offered a mirror to the country. Charitable gestures were not enough for those who demanded racial justice and called for a more honest public history of the country. The protest insisted, as have protests many times before, on a reckoning with the contradictions in the soul of the nation, right? But the backlash was swift and harsh. What felt like a blink of an eye. Questions about race and history were cast aside. The country, or at least a large portion of the country, retreated into the safety of its fantasies, reached for politics and politicians that shamelessly denied the reality of racism, embraced the so-called Great Replacement, and sought redemption in the demonization of anything associated with diversity and inclusion. People who claim to be allies worried about the overreach of wokeness. Blink of an eye. The only thing one can conclude is that folk were lying. That's right. They weren't telling the truth. And I want to say that if you find yourselves in rooms where folk who were just 6 years ago embracing diversity, if you find yourselves in boardrooms where people were talking about the importance of confronting our past, and they aren't uncomfortable with you in their presence right now, then you need to be asking yourselves some questions about who you are.
Mama. Check yourself. Check yourself.
Felt like a blink of an eye. Yes, sir. Now, all of this has been justified by some, by a certain story of the past. The assault on American history. The desire to disappear us. Like the celebrations before, the 250th reached back to a storybook America that required either the banishment of black folk from view or the reduction of our role in the country's history so as to affirm America's ongoing quest to be a more perfect union, to affirm America's innocence. And these ritual moments offer telescoped instances of the divided soul of the nation. They often traffic in myth and celebrate American exceptionalism, ignoring the realities that call both into question. But what might it mean to access the American past without the crutch of romance? To take in the totality of the chaos that is this country and find there doubleness, a kind of double consciousness that confronts and reveals the real source of our ongoing misery. We cannot be a beacon of freedom and a white republic without contradiction. Without depositing a kind of madness at the heart of the country. That's why we find ourselves in these cycles. Come on now. At one moment, the country embracing the idea of democracy for all, and then in a blink of an eye, they claim it for themselves. And insist that we will occupy a place that affirms their superiority and justifies our subordination. But why do we find ourselves repeatedly in this cycle? The boys told us in 1903 that black folks suffer from a kind of double consciousness, that we see ourselves through the eyes of those who despise us. But what if Du Bois's notion of double consciousness was actually a consequence of the double consciousness of the nation? That America imagines itself as a white republic and In the midst of it all, we haven't stood by passively. In the midst of this assertion that America belongs to them and the rest of us should simply shut up and assume our place, we've always spoken back. We did not stand by passively as the nation told itself a particular version of the story. Our experiences in this place offered a different account of freedom and democracy. We celebrated the days of liberation. We call them freedom celebrations. I'm going to be a professor for a quick second. Is that all right? Yes. How much time do I have? You got it. Come on, let's go.
Take your time. Take your time. Take your time. Take your time. There you go. Yeah. Take your time.
We celebrated the days of liberation. We call them freedom celebrations, Mr. President. We call them freedom celebrations. And they gave voice to what freedom might look like in this country, where the color line took on symbolic significance in our practice of signifying on the hypocrisy of American freedom. These alternative commemorations embraced an idea of freedom consistent with the Declaration of Independence and exposed the fact that white Americans were not who they say they were. Well, we held the view that if America was to be free, black folk had to be free. And the earliest examples of these freedom celebrations centered around January 1st, 1808. And the end of the transatlantic slave trade, we gathered. Another one included the abolition of slavery in the British West Indies on August 1st, 1834. We just celebrated Emancipation Day not too long ago, is that right? And of course, Juneteenth, the celebration of June 19th, 1865, and the final recognition of Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas. But the most important one in the 19th century was actually New York's Abolition Day on July 5th. And it celebrated the end of slavery in New York, and black folk placed in stark relief the contradiction between the ideals celebrated on the 4th of July and the way white Americans actually lived their lives among the enslaved throughout the South and the North. Here, black people in the United States cultivated freedom dreams and called attention to our tragic inheritance. In all of these moments, America's story of freedom was turned on its head. America imagined itself as a new Israel, but black folk imagined America as Egypt. The seat of Pharaoh in Washington, D.C. I'm reminded of Frederick Douglass's famous July 5th speech. See, we have to understand that speech against the backdrop of these freedom celebrations. We always offered a counter story to America's fantasy. Douglass said, fellow citizens, the existence of slavery is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously distrusts and disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it. As if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned, Douglas said. Be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear it away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crushed and destroy it forever. Douglas conditioned the promise of America on the country's willingness to rid itself of the serpent that eats its entrails. Our story mattered. It offered what one scholar calls a fugitive pedagogy, a fugitive instruction. To not only document the lies about us and the nation, but also to offer a different history that can change how we see the country and each other. Here I'm suggesting that our role in the history of this country remains as powerful as ever. Just like the freedom celebrations, our insistence in this moment on telling our story stands as a kind of counter-programming where a different idea of freedom emerges. You know, we have been celebrating these milestone anniversaries. And this year, 250 marks the 100th anniversary of Negro history. And I want you to just think about this. That Negro history was founded the same year that the nation was celebrating its 150th anniversary. And I want you to think about the 1920s, that decade when Negro history began. It is fascinating to note that the so-called Roaring 20s, a time of economic prosperity and consumption of jazz and Charleston, was also the period in which the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, exercised enormous influence over the political and cultural landscape of the country. It is important to note not to reduce the Klan's impact to the violence of lynching and racial intimidation. During the 1920s, I should have worn my reading glasses, I'm getting old. Right, during the 1920s, the Klan exercised this kind of power. We see it sway at the 1924 Democratic Convention. They claimed that Calvin Coolidge would not have been elected. Its most important piece of legislation, they say its most signature accomplishment in the 1920s is the Immigration Act of 1924. Why is that important? Because as they assault the Immigration Act of 1965, they want to return to the immigration regime established in 1924. Klan embrace that piece of legislation, this assertion of quotas, its assertion that these people from these S-hole countries, that they weren't talking about us, they were talking about Italy and Ireland, the Jews and the like, right? They, in so many ways, right, diluted Nordic America. You hear the language? Yes, sir. The man who chaired the committee that led to who co-authored the Immigration Act, the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act. Johnson was a member of the Klan. Senator Reed represented the state of Pennsylvania, which had 250,000 members of the Klan. Malcolm says, don't talk about the South. As long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're in the South. Imagine the 150th anniversary of the nation, the 100th year of the inauguration year of Negro History Week. The Klan was approved to hold its annual convention, what they call a convocation, on the grounds of the Philadelphia Exposition celebrating the 150th anniversary. They were going to burn a cross and celebrate the flag.
My.
The country was going to celebrate its 150th year, its sesquicentennial, at the height of Klan power. And in response to all of this, black folk organized and forced the mayor of Philadelphia to change the program again. So they turned down the Klan's request. They did, through a coalition of black folk and Italian folk and Irish folk and Jewish folk. And then they insisted that A. Philip Randolph speak. A. Philip Randolph, the founder of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Y'all with me? I'm trying to go through something. I'm walking through something. The man who would give us the March on Washington. Randolph ascended the dais in 1926 and sought to frame that celebration in light of the journey of the nation's darker peoples. He invoked the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, as the key to solving what he referred to as our perplexing problems. Randolph reached back to the insight of Frederick Douglass, reading the Declaration into America's self-conception and daring to find the country wanting. No matter what the Klan said or what the organizers of the celebration assumed, he claimed freedom as our own. Randolph insisted that black folk were quintessentially American, that our experience in this country takes one to the true subject of democracy, and that is the ongoing expansion and extension of the democratic process and the principles that make it worth fighting for. In the end, America failed to live up to its promise as long as all of its people were not free. And if we are to understand fully the power of the American project, Randolph implied, we must confront those people who put a blue note in the heart of the nation. He then turned to chronicle the gifts of black folk, a wonderful book that Du Bois wrote. The gifts of black folk, to detail their achievement in history and education, in labor and the arts, his interjection of African American history and his insistence on the centrality of black folk to the very idea of America, function as a kind of radical interruption of America's storytelling, of its fantasy. And like Frederick Douglass' famous July 5th oration, Randolph's invocation of black achievement amid the celebration of its ongoing erasure of black folk. was a moment when the color line blurred. All of these people listening to him had to confront the truth, even as they tried to banish it from view. 1926, 150. 1876 at the centennial. Frederick Douglass couldn't even get it. He was invited to be on the dais with President Reagan. A Philadelphia police officer, I'm not talking about Philadelphia, Mississippi. Philadelphia police officer said, ain't no way an N-word should be on the dais with the president. The most famous orator in the United States at the time was not allowed to speak. This national ritual after the horror of the Civil War required the erasure of us. In 1926, in the celebration of the 150th, the erasure of us. Now, the bicentennial was a bit different. In 1975, on the eve of the bicentennial, some 50 years after the sesquicentennial, President Ford did something no president has mentioned. President Ford, oatmeal man, as we call it, right? Did something that no president has ever done before. He issued a message on the observance of Black history, or Negro history. Remember, in 1976, the bicentennial, Negro History Week became what? Black History Month. Now, this was an important step. It marked a critical moment in the country because it was the initial step in yoking our history, listen, to the very story of America itself. The story of Black people to the American idea. President Ford made no attempt to beat back the diversity of the nation or to render Black people invisible, as happened in speeches in 1876 and 1926, but rather than press for the confrontation with Black history, President Ford tried instead to draft the journey of Black Americans into the service of an overarching story about the grandness of the American experiment and the power of American patriotism. Our story in his hands didn't challenge the nation, it affirmed it. It didn't challenge the nation, it affirmed it. He was folding Black experience into the American story in a way that would keep it from threatening the Republic. Read this way, Black history would not expose the lies at the heart of the country, but instead affirm its progress toward a more perfect union. Hold up, listen to me. What happens when our story is drafted to affirm America's innocence?
My.
What happens when Barack Obama, on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, tells the story of Black freedom struggle and says that at a certain point we lost our way? Here he's talking about Black power. And we start not wanting to work for ourselves, we wanted a handout. We didn't want to be responsible. I can quote you the passage. It sounds just like Ronald Reagan. What was Barack Obama doing in that moment? He was not only telling white America that he was safe, he was telling them that our history was safe. Why does all of this matter? Because here we are. Now, in the 250th year of this country, 50 years later, and we bear witness to an ugliness reborn, there are those who instinctively disentangle the American story from any history that questions its innocence. They don't even want to talk about more perfect union. Because perfection was secured in the founding. Because to talk about more perfect union is to talk about the country's failures. They don't want to do that. They long for an immigration policy that embraces an idea of the country imagined by the Klan in the 1920s. They reassert a consensus that takes as its moral center of gravity white folk. And they try to hide their hands with talk of merit and colorblind equality, draping it all in American exceptionalism and the glory of the flag. Their storybook version of America insists that Black folk be made to play minor roles in the history of the country. All with the aim of allowing people to be comfortable in their hatreds without judgment. I'm coming to a close. Y'all gave me a lot of time.
Take your time.
In March 2025, Mr. President, President Trump issued an executive order. I don't want to be too partisan here, but I have to. Even here in Florida.
Amen.
He issued an executive order entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. And it made explicit the approach that would shape the telling of America's founding. And the executive order recounts what it takes to be egregious efforts to undermine the cohesiveness of the country. They argue without a coherent national story, one that affirms the ideals and basic values of the country, America risks losing sight of its divine mission as a redeemer nation. Any mention of the actual history of racism in the country, of the horrors of slavery, or the reasons for the Civil War, or historical or contemporary examples of the country failing to live up to its ideals and values, amounts to an assault on America as a symbol of inspiration and greatness. To remember rightly on their view is effectively to disremember. They want to banish us from view. As such, the president set out to restore the quote-unquote truth in American history, which involved ordering an assessment of all public monuments, memorials, statues, markers within the Department of Interior's jurisdiction to ensure that they do not, quote, contain descriptions, depictions of other content that inappropriately disparages Americans past or living, and instead focus on the greatness of the achievements and progress of the American people. What I'm trying to suggest to you this morning is that this particular approach to American history goes hand in hand with the assault on our democracy. A kind of cultivated ignorance is required of if certain forces are to succeed in robbing the people of its ability to self-govern. A kind of passivity with regard to draconian policies and in the face of cruelty is needed if the calloused heart is to win out. And in the midst of it all, there are those who want to put us in our place. They long for an America that clearly belongs to them. There's a nostalgic longing for the 1950s. And you can't respond to nostalgia with nostalgia. We can't long for the 1960s as we confront their longing for the 1950s. Something else is required of us. Vice President J.D. Vance reinforced this view of expectation of gratitude. You know how many people expect gratitude from you? Me. They want to thank us they want us to thank them for our positions in life. Vice President Vance reinforced this view in a speech on July 5th, and you can hear, July 5th, 2025. And you can hear the venom in his tone as it recounts the words from Zoran Mamdani, then more candidate. He said, Mamdani said this. America is beautiful, contradictory, unfinished. I am proud of our country, even as we constantly strive to make it better. That seems straightforward. And then here's Vance. Where is Mamdani's gratitude? He dares on the 249th anniversary to congratulate it by paying homage to its completeness and to its contradictions. That's it. For him, the idea of America as an ongoing experiment, the language of America working towards a more perfect union, or to admit that we've allowed a narrow, cramped view of the people of this nation to fester, all this is an affront because the people who turned wilderness, this is this language, who turned wilderness into the greatest country on earth, made Mamdani's life here possible. Quote, he might not be alive were it not for the generosity of a country he dares to insult on its most sacred day. Who the hell does he think? Say it. Vance expects gratitude because he believes that freedom is his gift to give. How can someone like me, going on the coast of Mississippi, Mama had a first baby, 16 years old, who attended Morehouse College and received a PhD from Princeton, who lives a comfortable life, refused to show gratitude to the country, to the quote-unquote settlers who carved a civilization out of the wilderness that, quote, made my life possible. They want gratitude because they believe freedom is their possession to give and to take away. Why do they believe it? Because of the doubleness at the heart of the country. America is a beacon of freedom, and it is a white republic. They expect gratitude, but I can remind Vice President Vance of the wounded souls separated from their lands who actually felled the trees and cleared the swamps.
That's right.
Of those who saw their children sold off to the highest bids.
My.
Whose backs bore the sting of the lash of the whip, and who took their last breaths without knowing freedom. Of those who built schools for their children because the country refused to educate them. Who toiled in the homes of white folks, beat back the advances of sexual predators in order to put food on the table. I could tell stories of those who dangled from white oak and poplar trees because they dared to claim freedom as their own. Or the moments when somebody, somewhere, in some city, wailed because they had to bury their child who was killed by the police. I could go on and on, and they say such talk inappropriately disparages Americans past and present. Past and present. Gratitude is demanding. Still. Now history calls each of you. You're on the front lines. I know I'm struggling to find words to speak to you because federal government is broken, state government is captured. All of the innovation rests with you. The question is, will you answer the call? Each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it on the tread, or are you comfortable with your feet on the white folks' table?
Oh. Woo.
Are you court prophets? At the end of The Evidence of Things Not Seen by James Baldwin, Baldwin was clear. If you understand the nature of wrong, and if you collaborate with wrong, never again can you invoke, let my people go.
My.
You must answer this moment with courage and conviction. The political consultants will tell you how to run your campaigns and what constitutes viable policy. They will try to keep you boxed in, drawing between the traditional political lines. But our time requires more of each of you. To be bold and courageous, to be imaginative and willing to risk it all, to stand in the tradition that is the wind beneath your wings, because we have the responsibility to renew this democracy in our time. Ours is a moment of reckoning in the 250th year of this country. I can't believe here we are in the 250th year, we have to deal with this shit again. I'm struggling, and you are on the front lines, and you have to deal with Byron Donalds.
Woo! Woo!
And I'm not saying that as a partisan. I'm saying that as someone who's committed to democracy as such. I'm not saying that by appealing to some easy racial politics. I'm saying that as someone who's committed to democracy as such. Say it. You walk the corridors of power. Rise to the damn occasion. Let your imagination soar and challenge the horrors of our current days. Once again, we have been reminded that too many people believe that freedom is their possession to give and to take away. We know that, as Dr. King said, that racism still sits on the throne of this nation. But fortune has favored us at times with a liberal hand. But pronouncements and policies suggested just 6 years ago that the country had turned a corner, and we imagined ourselves as a truly multiracial democracy, but that sentimentality masked the deceit. Well, cried their crocodile tears, but that's because they were doing something for you as opposed to with you. Racial justice imagined as a philanthropic enterprise, as a charitable gesture, as opposed to something much more fundamental. We watched the country turn dark again. And this time has been especially painful because the folk who were supposedly our allies have capitulated. Frederick Douglass asked in July 5th, 1875, Mr. President, he said, "What tendencies will spring out of it? And how will they affect us?" And he's talking about that moment when our freedom was made possible by a falling out between white men. Now, what will happen once they've reconciled? Douglass witnessed the so-called friends, his so-called friends, turned their backs on a just vision of democracy and settled comfortably into the view that American life was for white people only. I'm just thinking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I'm just trying to figure out what she's doing. You see, I don't care. I know you have to navigate political currents. That's not my role. All right. You invited me.
Yeah.
And the point is that we cannot bite our tongue, no matter what people see. I'm not trying to tell you to be naive. I'm not trying to suggest that you be naive about how power works. But I want you to know that if you think you can compromise your soul in pursuit of it, yes, sir, you become just as dangerous as they.
That's right.
If not more so. Oh, I don't know what's coming out of here. Our politics presuppose imagination capture. Listen, it presupposes imagination capture. Both parties don't want us to think outside of the box or the frames. Well, our fears and ambitions must be familiar. They must be rote and contained. And every single time we stick our heads outside of the box, speak words about the possibility of a different way of living, claim that markets are not the answer to all social and moral ills, and demand a responsive politics to our troubles, familiar language interrupts and we're forced once again to draw within the lines. I'm not interested in fighting over isms. I could give less than a damn whether I'm thought of as progressive or not.
That's right.
The values animating the fight for a better world draw my attention and heart, not ideological fealty. I'm my mama's child. I want a world that reflects the love poured in me, and the boogeyman isn't as effective when we are more concerned about what and who we care about than about what we fear and the labels that signal our virtue. Stop virtue signaling. And govern. Motivated by love for the most vulnerable among us.
Yes.
Both parties and established interests want us fighting on old terrains. Debating about socialism and communism. Want you to just simply sing, "We shall overcome." The Cold War and vital central politics, Reaganism, the triangulation of the Democratic Leadership Council and its various offsprings, and MAGA and civil rights establishment are all in a fight for how we imagine the past, how we imagine the present and the future. Easy slogans will only secure our change. Let's break free. Allow our imaginations to do the work this moment demands and draw outside the damn line.
Yes.
All right?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to sit down.
No.
I don't know if the country's going to survive. I don't know if the country's going to survive. I do know it's in your hands. Please understand where you are. Each generation, out of relative obscurity, must discover its mission, fulfill it.